Hey, welcome to the new tutorial. Thank you so much for your support. We're gonna continue making materials for this scene with Corona for Cinema 4D. So I no longer have issues with Corona for Cinema 4D that I had. Everything is solved now, so I can use Cinema 4D Release 21 and Corona 5, which is awesome. The general workflow, the things I've shown you so far, it doesn't change anything, so it's basically still the same. So let's continue with the materials. Alright, let's start doing some fabric materials. So I'm gonna go ahead into the layers tab and enable sofa model here and zoom in and create a new material and call it sofa fabric. Open up node editor and just drag this guy inside. Okay. So I'm gonna load in a couple of textures now. I use textures from Texture Supply. You can find them on Patreon and Gumroad. Really high quality textures. Let's take a look. You can see it's really high res. So I'm gonna use diffuse map, normal map, and displacement map. So let's enable the bump and displacement. And first connect the bitmap, the diffuse bitmap to diffuse, and you can also connect this normal map here, but we're gonna need a plugins Corona normal. Connect this to the texture and connect it to the bump. All right, let's close this down and let's apply this texture to our sofa, and let's hit a test render. Right, so right off the bat looks very nice. We could use some Fresnel effect like you usually do with the texture, with the fabrics. So let's go back to, actually let's go to the node editor and let's make some room here. New shader. We're gonna need a layer shader and load it inside. And we're gonna need a Fresnel. And we're gonna connect this together. And we need to set this to add. So you can see the brightness affects the edges like it should. The effect is way too strong, so let's reduce the opacity, and maybe let's play around with this. So let's just make this effect a little more on the edges like this. Alright, so let's do another test render. The difference is not huge because I don't want the difference to be huge. I just want a slight Fresnel effect on the fabric. You can see it. This looks very nice. Now what I want to add is more details. So we're going to do that using the displacement. So let's go back to normal to the node editor and connect the displacement. Displacement, and we need something like I don't know, 0.5. Alright, so the effect is way too strong, so I need to set it to like 0.1. Maybe add a negative minus 0.1. And I don't know about you guys, but displacement doesn't update in IR in my case. So sometimes I just have to disable, enable the object, but usually you just have to re-render. I'm guessing it's a bug in my case anyway. Still too strong. Make it like a 0.5 and 0.5. And I'll re-render again. Yeah, this looks much better. In this case it just comes down to high quality textures and the basic shader setup, and usually you get a nice result. So I did the same thing for the pillows as well, just different texture. So this is the same technique. Let's take a look at the node. Same technique, different texture. I also use a bit of a filter here to darken up the texture, but that's pretty much it. So it's a repetitive process, which I don't want to go and show you the same thing each time. Don't want to waste your time. So I did the same thing for all the pillows. Also the blanket, same process, different textures. This is the texture I used. And I also made this opacity map. So these holes, these black areas will represent holes in the shader. Some bump and a little bit of displacement, and that's pretty much it. So the same process. Next, the wall texture, the plaster. So what I used was material from the collection pack. Let's apply this on here. And use some bump also with a normal map, and super simple stuff, and it looks good. You can also add some reflection here. And maybe just use this texture in the glossiness and reduce the effect of the reflection. I switched to the standard material editor because I was having some issues with the node editor. It's still not that stable, I believe, so whenever that happens I just use the standard material editor. This one usually works. Maybe I can decrease the maybe make it like a 0.3 this texture. Let's region render this, and this looks pretty good. So usually in Corona, creating some basic materials, you won't have much problems. You just need high quality textures and put them in the right place, and that's it. It's a very good renderer, and it really you don't have to struggle a lot to get a realistic look. So this is something I really like about Corona. The wooden picture frame, again, loaded in diffuse, reflection, and a bump. Diffuse, simple texture. In the reflection, this didn't look glossy enough, so I used filter. Open up the filter and increase the gamma. Let's region render here for the faster preview, and add some contrast. A little bit more of contrast. It's looking nice. Maybe reduce the reflection a little bit. A bit more. Okay. And there was some bump here, which I think we can even do less, 3%. Next, let's do this cable plastic here. So what I want to do is make it pretty dark, like 7%, and we're going to need reflection. And we're going to break up the reflections. So use a dirt map from Texture Supply, and I think we need to adjust it a little bit, so I'm going to use a filter. And and decrease the lightness, decrease the contrast, and increase the gamma. The cable looks good, but the switch doesn't, so I'm gonna just call this plastic 1 and call this plastic 2. And I'm gonna drop this onto the switch. Okay, and you really increase the gamma here. I want it more reflective, like this, a little bit more. Yeah, that's it. Next, this metal material for the lamp. Just overwrite this. So what I did was black material, 3%. Let's disable the bump for now. In the reflection, I have this fingerprint texture, scratches. It's not updating very fast for some reason. Alright, so this is way too glossy, so I usually use again filter and reduce the lightness. Just gonna play around with these settings to get it right. So let's increase the gamma and contrast until we get something nice. More contrast, less gamma. Let's also decrease the reflection. We don't want it to be so reflective. Okay, maybe reduce the contrast. Okay, this looks kind of nice. Maybe lower this and increase the contrast. Trying to find the right, actually sometimes you don't know what I'm going for. I just play around with the settings and then I see something I like and just use it. This is looking good. A little less lightness here. Okay, I'm liking this. And I like to add a little bit of a bump. I use the texture for a dirt map from the texture supply again. And 10% will obviously be way too much, so I'm gonna just a tiny little bit so you get this little deformations on the surface. Even less, like 0.7 maybe. Yeah, that was good. So use the same thing on different objects. You can use the plastic for this. We used this part is chrome. So what I can do is just duplicate this. Let's apply it to this cylinder and I guess this cylinder as well. This guy. And let's keep everything, just make it more reflective. And in the index, let's increase this IOR to something like 10. I don't want it too reflective, but I'm gonna have to make it like 50. I'm probably gonna need to disable the bump here, and we need to set it to cubic mapping. Something like 3x3 usually works fine for this kind of texture. Let's see a bit closer. That works. Okay, so again, quite simple. You could play around with this, make a very complex material with the multiple layers and stuff, but you know, just a matter of preference for this piece here. Simple works well. I usually create my furry carpets with hair, with Cinema 4D hair, but this time around I use the mesh, and I use the one from one of the Bertrand Benoit scenes. I really like the shape of it, so I just use this little piece of the carpet, and I made instances and copied them all over to make a huge carpet, and you can't even see the seams. And the texture is very simple, just to diffuse, no reflection and nothing, just a texture also from Bertrand Benoit. I tried with the reflection, but you know, this looks very good, so basically it doesn't get more simple than this. So next, this white wood for a door, which is basically there just for the compositional purposes, you know, to get the depth in the image. You know, creating an illusion there's something behind the camera, even though it's not. Objects like this always help with the overall feeling of the image and the depth of the image. And the texture is very simple, just a couple of textures inside really. This door is out of focus in this image anyway, so I didn't pay much attention to it. I just decreased the and mixed the texture with the white color, so you get a nice whiter result. The reflection has a texture that is filtered like we did before, and there's a little bump inside as well, very little. Even though you have objects in your scene that are out of focus, it's still a good idea to pay attention to the details like reflection and bump, because those add to the quality of the bokeh, of the depth of field. So keep that in mind. So I believe that's all the materials in this scene. What I usually do is export high-res render and make some changes in Photoshop. Sometimes I use LUTs, but not often. In this case, we can. This is the one from Bertrand Benoit again, and I use this is a free LUT from his website. It really adds a lot to the. It adds a nice tone mapping. Adds a nice color, nice white balance and everything. Just worked out nicely. So usually I'll go and try a couple of LUTs. Maybe I find something I like. If not, I create my own LUTs in Photoshop, or I just export raw image and play around in Photoshop. I usually also use Bloom and Glare, and default works very well. Depends on the scene. It adds this a bit of glowy effect to the highlight area, which you get in real life. So usually having this on is a good idea. I always render out additional passes, so I go to multipass, and in this case I render out direct lighting, reflect, refract, translucency, volumetrics, and ID. So basically just select it and throw it inside. And I like to use them in case I need them, or in post. You know, you have an object, you would like more reflection, you just use the reflection pass and use the ID mask. Simple stuff. So this is my Corona workflow. I don't really worry much about render settings. Usually the defaults work really well. Also the shaders are really easy to set up. There are a few glitches and a few bugs, as you maybe have seen during this tutorial, but in all it's a really great renderer. I really enjoy using it. It's really high quality, and I highly recommend it. So again, thank you so much. See you in the next one.